The first type of price discrimination that we'll talk about is called perfect price discrimination. This is when you have, as the firm, perfect information about every customer's willingness to pay. Okay, so let's do a simple example and then a more general example. So suppose you basically have, we're going to call this perfect price discrimination. I should mention this is also often called first degree price discrimination, although that's not the terminology I'm going to try and use here because I don't think the degrees are very intuitive. There's first, second, and third degree price discrimination, but we'll call them by names that are a bit more descriptive. So perfect price discrimination, you're going to charge everyone or charge for each transaction the willingness to pay. And you have, to do that, you need to have perfect information about the willingness to pay for each transaction. So a simple example, suppose you've got 3 people. Alice, her willingness to pay is $10. Bob, his willingness to pay is $8. And Carol, her willingness to pay is $4. So this is for a cup of coffee, say, for example. What price can you charge? Well, if you have to charge the same price to everyone, if you charge $10, your profit is going to be, we'll assume that the coffee is free just because, you're going to sell only to Alice, and so you're going to make $10. If you charge a price of $8, you're going to sell an $8 cup of coffee to Bob and an $8 cup of coffee to Alice, because since she values it at 10, she'd be willing to pay 10, so 8 is a pretty good deal. So you're going to sell at 16, and if you charge 4, you can sell to everyone. There's 3 customers, so they're all 3 going to buy it, and you're going to make $12. Okay, so the monopoly price in this example, the one that maximizes profit if you have to charge everyone the same price, is to charge $8 for a cup. But if you knew everyone's exact willingness to pay, you could charge each one exactly how much they're willing to pay. So Alice gets one price. The Alice price is $10. The Bob price is $8. And the Carol cup price is $4. That's just enough so that each one of them pays. And the profits you make here are $22. Okay? So more generally, a general demand curve is essentially the same thing. It's a schedule of people's willingness to pay. It's easiest to think about if there's a bunch of different people, they all want to buy one product, and if they're all going to buy this one product, they all have a different willingness to pay, and we put them in order from this guy at the top. He's willing to pay the most. Say this is 100, and down here we have somebody who, if it's free, he'll take it, but otherwise he won't. And there's 100 such people in this line. Okay, and if we have marginal cost, say here at 10, I'm just making these numbers up, then this is kind of our standard problem. Now, if we were to solve this for a monopolist, we would find our marginal revenue here, and the amount we charge is where this marginal cost is equal to marginal revenue, and we would charge this price up around here, probably around $55. Now, the issue here is that if we can perfectly price discriminate, we can identify what each person is willing to pay. If we have market power, we can charge them something and they can decide to buy or not buy, but they can't get it from anyone else. And so we don't need to charge $55 to everyone. Instead, we'll charge each person their exact willingness to pay. So the guy who's up here willing to pay $100, he pays $100. The next guy down is willing to pay $99, he pays $99. The next person down is willing to pay $98, and that's what he pays. And for each of those people, I make a profit of whatever they paid minus $10. Okay, so for the first person, it's this high. I make $90 off them, I make $89 off the next. I make $88 off the next. And essentially, if we fill in this whole triangle, that area becomes my profit. Okay? Because each one of these transactions, I make the height and then the number of transactions is basically the width of this triangle. So my profit in this example here, suppose this is 90. This is a triangle with a height of 90 and a width of 90, and so I'll make 1/2 90 squared for profit. What's interesting or notable is what happens to consumer surplus and deadweight loss. Okay? So consumer surplus is the difference between what a customer is willing to pay and what they actually end up paying. Okay? In this example, every single person pays exactly their willingness to pay. So every single person has no consumer surplus, and if we add up the consumer surplus of all the individuals, the sum of a bunch of zeros is still 0. And so we have 0 consumer surplus in this perfect price discrimination world. Deadweight loss, though, is also 0. There are no people who are willing to pay more for this product than it's worth, who are not able to buy it. Every single person who desires this product and is willing to pay more than its manufacturing marginal cost gets the product. It's good from that perspective, but bad from the sense that they get it, but they don't enjoy any consumer surplus. Okay? So total welfare is equal to the total welfare under perfect competition. What's different is who enjoys the benefits. In the perfect price discrimination world, all of those gains go to the firm, instead of it being split between firms and consumers. So in this sense, perfect price discrimination is it's basically good from like an economic efficiency standpoint, but it's bad for consumers. But as I've said before, economists don't care that much about this distinction. I mean, we do a little bit. We are humans, but like from a modeling perspective, it's all value, and firms are owned by people. That pays people's wages, salaries. It's used to buy other goods in the economy. So the distinction isn't that meaningful, okay? And so we'll often be like, well, they're efficient, but they're not good for consumers. So what's an example of a firm that might practice perfect price discrimination? Well, I'll give you 2 short examples. One possibility is to think about actually like a university. A university has great information about how much people are able to pay because it has access to all sorts of financial records. And because they've seen your application strength, they can probably estimate how many competing offers you have from other top schools. And so they have an estimate from that about your willingness to pay and your ability to pay. Then they don't charge different tuition to different people, but they have a lot of leeway in how much financial aid they give. So if you have a high price, that would be equivalent to sort of setting the price equal to the maximum anyone is willing to pay. And then you can offer tuition discounts to everyone who's willing to pay, but unable to pay basically as much. Okay? So that's one example. The problem with that example is that universities are often not profit maximizing firms. They're public institutions, and it may be inappropriate to use a profit maximizing model. It depends on what your view on what universities are trying to do. That's beyond the scope of what I'll cover here today, though. Another example, I used to work for a company that shall remain nameless, but I guess you can figure it out. But anyway, it's nothing scandalous. They did they sold analysis, forecasts and things for different industries and companies about the economic trajectory that those companies were going to, like what did we forecast for GDP growth and balance of payments, exchange rates, all this kind of stuff. Now, if you looked on our company's website, you wouldn't see a price anywhere. Instead, you would see like a call the sales department number. And if you call the sales department tries to basically feel you out and sort of see, oh, so you're a big bank and you want to invest in a new country, and so you want to get a little background on it. Okay, that's great to know. Oh, you're like a retiree who used to work in the Peace Corps in this country and you just are curious about it. Oh, you're a school. They can kind of get a read from all this about what they think your willingness to pay is going to be for this. And then the price that is negotiated is, based on that, essentially. It's not exactly the same thing, and we weren't totally a monopoly. There were a couple other firms that did similar things, but if you needed information about some countries, maybe we were one of the few places you could get it. Now, how are those two examples able to do perfect price discrimination? One, they could get a lot of information about their customers, either through hiring a sales department that interviewed and tried to talk to potential buyers, or because you have to submit all this information as part of your application procedure. So they have the information. Two, they've got the market power. To some extent, you can see they don't have to be perfect monopolies, but they have to be offering something that you can't just easily get somewhere else. And third, they have a nice ability to prevent resale. So in the case of higher education, if I offer you a tuition discount, you're not allowed to then take that offer and sell it to somebody else who didn't get into the college or didn't get the same offer. They're non-transferable. Okay? You can't get the education by going and then just extract it like in the Matrix down a tube and give it to the other guy instead. Doesn't work that way. So you can prevent resale very easily. In the other example, the company I used to work for, it was an online company. You log in with an ID and a username, and then we have information about your IP address and things. So we have a way to monitor who's using the product. And if we start to see that people are using your login details who are not located where we expect you to be, we can call in and be like, hey, it seems like you've been hacked. So we're going to change all your credentials so you don't get hacked again. But we all know what's really going on. So if you try to give away our product and, sell it on a secondary market to people because you got a good lower price and other people are only being offered a high price, well, you get sniffed out and found out. So this illustrates kind of the challenges to implementing perfect price discrimination, but also sort of the potential payoff is that you get the maximum possible profit, all the welfare that the economy can generate. Now, many other times, you're not going to have all that information, and it's going to be too hard to get it. So we'll talk about that next.